Welcome to the show. That was not a dramatic entrance. I needed to do some crowd control out there. So here we are. And yes, it's an Arkansas shirt. Let me just start with a little ditch that we need to get clear. This is pronounced Kansas. It doesn't matter what the 25 people from Kansas say. They're the ones that are wrong. Kansas, how do you know? Because this is Arkansas. And yes, it's a great state. If you haven't heard of it, then you were probably born after Bill Clinton. And it's a pretty great state, especially that, southeast part. Northwest part of Arkansas is probably, in everyone's opinion, the most aesthetically pleasing, natural beauty-wise. But then also it's got all those jobs, and who cares about jobs though, right? Getting to work is fresh on my mind, and I want to talk about this. Is this true? Cash flow is for suckers. And this is the most flabbergastingly backwards thing that I personally know of. And I want to briefly interrupt this to say thank you for checking this out. I am experimenting with BeLive. It's a live streaming platform that allows you to share screens. It's only letting me do this live stream in 720p, and so I noticed in my last go around that the screen was super grainy. So I hope it's not grainy anymore. I hope that it's nice and clear. If you see this and you're live, then I would love for you to let me know if the picture looks good. So to the point though, let's talk about this. Why would anyone pursue something in real estate in a market like Oklahoma or Arkansas or Wichita or Tulsa? So Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Wichita, any place that's not oh my gosh, my house just valued by $100,000 last month, like the coast. Like that is the number one thing. Like I totally get why we say if you're in California, if you're in the Bay Area and your home is gaining $20,000 a month in equity, like, okay, I totally get why you're willing to lose $2,000 a month in rent, or, the difference between what you owe the bank, what you're spending on repairs and maintenance, and rent. But how can we truly say that in other markets like Oklahoma City and places that we've already mentioned, that cash flow is for suckers? Like, why would we not be pursuing cash flow? Because if you haven't noticed, costs come monthly, some quarterly, some annually, but our lives are spent day to day, month to month, and our costs are largely incurred month to month. So, and this is the most perplexing, bamboozling, flabbergasting thing for me is when I got into real estate investing, I was so clearly focused on cash flow. It is obviously cash flow and therefore the derivative metrics like cash on cash return or return on investment are two of the things that get thrown around in real estate investing very commonly. And so return on investment is kind of a wonky, not clear thing, because what is your true return on investment? Like, I mean, what is your investment and what's the return? What do you consider? So return on investment is something that I learned early on is better rendered as the IRR, the internal rate of return, because IRR factors in more than just your rent in minus your costs. So, and what gets to the point far better than ROI is cash on cash return. For every dollar that's deployed, how is it returning? And so when we start out in owning rental property, we were focusing heavily on cash flow and then specifically cash on cash return. And so at a point where we had picked up a handful of properties and, I had just cut my teeth in property management. I was working on getting those rents up, and man, we had just really, it had gone well, and it's been so awesome. And so I walk into this meeting with a banker that I met literally off Wall Street. And I'm from, so not New York, live in Oklahoma City, serve the Oklahoma City and Salt Lake City real estate markets. So nowhere near New York City. But I'm sitting in New York City, and I've got an Oklahoma shirt on. And this guy walks by, like fully New Yorked out, like suit, looking super snazzy, and walks by, sees the shirt, and he's like, "Dude, are you from Oklahoma City?" It's like, small world. Yes. Long story short, he was from Oklahoma City. He was there to do the IPO of a bank in Oklahoma City. I thought, no way. At the time, I was really, really new into real estate investing. So I thought, you, me, you, me. Yes, this is awesome. So a couple months later, back in Oklahoma City, we got together, and I sit down, and he's like, "Man, Will, show me what you guys have been doing." It's like, all right. So break out my portfolio, and we get to it. And I'm like, all right, we got like a couple, like $1.5 million, let's say, $1.5 million in real estate, and but Tony, we've got $1,200 a month in cash flow. Like, no. And he's like, okay, tell me. No, Tony. That's like after all of the stuff has been paid, we got $1,200 a month in cash flow. That is a third of our monthly costs of living. So I could see it so clearly. I could see the path to financial independence so clearly because we had a third of our monthly costs of living already covered by our cash flow. And so I'm like, Tony, this is the thing. And you got to be blown away with this. Like, this is the thing. Our cost of living is $3,600 a month. We got $1,200 a month coming in cash flow. And it's, that's amazing. Like, we did this in a compressed time frame. So dude, this is where we want to get. We want to like double that. And it's going to be awesome. Like, are you in? And he's like, well, let's look into this. And he was so underimpressed, so completely unimpressed by the cash flow that it was jarring. It created this dissonance of, why don't you care about this? Because as a young investor, it was all I cared about. If a property didn't cash flow, you didn't buy it. If it didn't cash flow enough, you didn't buy it. Because your cash flow is your financial independence. Because our cost of living are real costs. Our cost of living at the time were about $3,600 a month. So those real costs really have to be covered. And if you can cover that predictably by well underwritten cash flow, then that's the path to financial independence. And I'll say it absolutely is. Like, that's so true. But what was jarring to me is sitting across from a savvy banker, like a shrewd, excellent leader of a bank, and for him to be holistically unimpressed with the cash flow that we had, that was disproportionately high, for the quality of properties we had. It made me lean in, and it made me say, Tony, why don't you care about the cash flow? And he showed me something. Well, he explained something to me that I'll show you that was mind-blowing to me. I know I'm stupid. I'm ignorant, but I'm less ignorant now, and I hope to be less ignorant in the future. And I want you to be less ignorant of things that we are unaware that we're ignorant of. So let me tell you and then exemplify for you what Tony showed me. So Tony says, Will, these loans are on 25-year amortizations. We have clients on 15-year, 10-year, 7-year, and 5-year amortizations. Amortizations meaning the lifespan, the length of the loan. He said, so for you've got this cash flow on a 25-year amortization. If somebody else had it on a 30-year amortization, then that's it's different. They could have the exact same dynamics of their properties and get more cash flow simply because the amortization of their loans is longer. So conversely, we have several high earning, high net worth clients who are putting their stuff on 7-year amortizations. They lose $2,000 a month, but in 7 years, they will own 100% of their properties, and you will own 13. like based on the, whatever, like depending on your down payment and your amortization length would dictate your amortization schedule. But in those first 7 years, you pay a minority of the interest. You pay the majority of the interest that you'll pay over the life of the loan because you've paid down your debt to a very small degree. So what Tony was exposing was the fact that your cash flow is completely derived from your type of financing. So that's not a knock against you, but for us to care too much about cash flow as a financier puts us in a position of being subject to too many different variables. So we want to look at equity, because at the end of the day, our ability to partner with any person confidently is going to be determined by our security in the partnership, because the best of intentions are great, but what happens if the market shifts or something unpredictable in that person's life shift or something else? Like, what happens in those what else's or those something else's? Our ability to have collateral that's sufficient to recover damages is so crucial. And so for them, on the 7-year amortization or the 5-year amortization, there is so little of a risky runway there that it's not even a question. And so it would be intellectually dishonest for us to say, hey, this person who will own 20% of that property in a year, 20 more percent of that property, and 20 more percent the next year, and 20 more percent the next year, that person should be looked down on in investing, while this person who's got a 30-year amortization and gets cash, gets positive cash flow should be looked up to. And so that was a massive, like, literally, it's like someone took me and I'm in a snow globe and I look around and it's like all beautiful and serene, and they shook it up. And what's nuts is that he's not wrong. It's a different perspective, because my perspective is as a real estate investor and his perspective is as a financer. But what Tony had the God-given talent at unveiling for me at that moment was one metric isn't sufficient for understanding the total scenario. And so what I want to show you here, I want to go through and look at a few different ideas. Can you see this part of the screen? If you can see this, I am so sorry. Dude, I don't know if you can see this or not. Sorry, I'm learning. I am learning. Let's jump to this. All right. All right. So this calculator, you cannot see me. Why? Am I back? Am I back? Yes, I'm back. I'm back. Is really what Tony was was saying is equity is king. Really what he was saying is equity is king. Equity is what constitutes for the financer security. But what happened next was fascinating to me. So I said, okay, well, Tony, here is what we're looking at. We've got $1,200 a month in cash flow, but we've got about $420,000 in equity. And Tony goes, wait, you've got how much equity on how much value? It's like, Will, that's impressive. It's like, but it's totally unrealized. It's like you owning Bitcoin and it being sky high right now. It's like cool in theory, but try to live in it. Try to spend it and still have the asset. Like you've got to sell it to realize the gain. So equity, in my mind, to that point, is kind of worthless. It's a token like badge, like, hey, I got all this equity. But the cash flow is it's the freedom, it's the salvation, to put it in like more spiritual terms. It's not spiritual, but it felt freeing at a spiritual level. So that was so dumbfounding for me to hear Tony say, hey, nice, thanks, Bradley. Appreciate that. It was so freeing for him to say, hey, your equity is impressive. Cash flow is irrelevant, because I think what happens, and really where I can see this, is when I look at Alan. Alan is a older, wiser investor that I had the privilege of learning from over a several month period as he was exiting his 40+ year career of being a real estate broker and an investor. And when I met Alan, he had a tranche of $40 million homes that he was selling, and it was part of his greater portfolio of more than 100 homes in this one area, but 40 of them were tranched together as $1 million and up homes. And so asking him, why would you sell those together? Like, isn't the market value higher, per whatever? And he had a level of understanding that's taken me years to even learn to think through that same lens. And I look forward to the next 30 years that it will take to gain Alan's total skill set. But what happened in my mind after my conversation with banker Tony is this idea of, like, let's take that calculation we just did where you're losing $2,600 a month. Okay, well, you're not losing $2,600 a month, because that $2,600 a month is split out into principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Your taxes and insurance they're a sunk cost. So your variable here, because you're going to have to pay that regardless. Your variable here is that principal and interest. But with such a short amortization, your principal portion of that payment is really high. And that principal is yours. It's your money. It's equity, so it's locked in an asset, and you have to do something to tap into that, like a cash out refinance or a sale, but it's yours to keep. And the interest portion, while it is the interest portion is lower, because the annual interest rate, if we look at an amortization schedule for a 5-year loan or a 7-year loan or a 10-year loan, the interest is advertised in a per annum, a yearly interest. So compressing the amortization schedule doesn't create more interest payment. It doesn't make your monthly interest payment any. I don't think you should look into this, but it makes your principal payment much higher, which is a forced savings account. So if you were to build a portfolio with this in mind and say, okay, and this is one of the things that I saw Alan do that was masterful, and one of the reasons Alan owned said $1 million properties in a market where the rent tops out at like $3,800 a month. Your debt payment on a $1 million house, if you buy it using financing, your debt payment is like $5,200 a month. So what I could never wrap my mind around is why on earth you would lose money on purpose. But here's something. Okay, so $1 million house, and this is, I promise, we'll make it worth it. So $50,000 land, and then $950,000 home. So annually, what that gives you, so that there's the home value is $950,000, and that's appreciated over a 27.5 year window, which means that every year you've got a $34,545,000 depreciation loss. So that's what my mind is wrapped around. That's why you do that. That's why you build a portfolio where you build it off of cash flow, because that's where we all start. That's what we need, because that's financial freedom. Is you've got to be able to say, this phone plan and all the other recurring predictable costs of our life need to be paid for. Okay, but once you surpass that, then what's the use of cash flow? Because what will happen is you will spend it, but is that what you want? So cover your needs, and then maybe force yourself to save the rest. Well, what's a good forced savings account? Required additional interest payments are a great forced savings account. And so if you do a shorter amortization, you will own more of the asset every single year. So, and that's a really high level kind of thinking. And I love being challenged by people who just see it through a slightly different way, to take the sacred cows and say, wait, you mean cash on cash return is a limited metric? That there's more to gain than just the cash flow? And so cash on cash return is really good, and it's prudent, because part of the thing about real estate as an investment mechanism that is so powerful as an investment is that it pays you to own it. That's actually what makes it an investment, and not just pure speculation, is it pays you to own it. And there are these other things, these other levers that we talk about in another video. Dude. Hey, Bradley,